before we get there, let's take a look at the configurator preferences. So pretty simple. Here's our numbering sequence. Here's our default revision number. Here we have the ability to, when we create a configuration, we have the ability to use an ID based on a formula. So we can have a structure of the ID. When we're done with our configuration, we have the ability to do a finish button first. So that's what this is. And you'll see that later when we get into the configuration screen. Over here, we have the ability to enable or disable these fields. So for example, I may disable this warehouse so that we can't produce it in different locations. And the same thing with the discount. Maybe I don't want my salespeople to discount or change the price. Over here under rollup, you have options here. I could establish just a price from the parent item, the item that we're producing, that sets the price. Nothing matters underneath. I can add up all the children items. Children configuration allows me to calculate the sell price, rolling up the selling price of each option, but excluding any fixed materials on the bill of material, multiplied by the quantity of each option. And then parent and children, the selling price takes both the parent item, whatever that price is, could be a base price, and then all the children options can add into it. Now keep in mind, these are just default settings. When you go into your configuration and you set it up, you can define these settings there. So let's get started with a simple configuration. And then we'll make it more and more complex as we go on. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to pick a bill of material. So we'll use that same bill of material that we had here, which is a truck. Here's the revision of the truck, right? So if we had multiple revisions, we could select which one. A might not be the current one. Only one could be active. We can give it a description. Here's that option that requires the finish button before you're actually committing the configuration. And now below, we can add our features. So if we hit the plus button here, we can look up different features. Now, if we go down to, for example, a configuration item for the truck, we have a label and we have a description. And notice all of the options. Now, where did these come from? Well, if we go over to our features and we look it up, you can see how I set it up here. At the top, you notice we can allow non-inventory options and also whether or not we want to print the results. Down below, you can see all of our different options. So notice they're associated, they have a label, they're associated to an inventory ID that could be a non-stock or a stock inventory ID. And you'll want to make sure that when you create this item, you don't have to put a lot in there. But if you're if you're rolling up the price from the children, you're going to want to make sure that you have some sort of price in there. Under default price, you're going to want something. Before I continue, only 15% of you are subscribed. Hit that subscribe button now to get notified about new videos and events. And so, for example, over here, what I did is I made this 0, but as you started to add items, I put the variance in there. So, for example, to get to the long bed, it was $200 extra. Fixed include means this item has to be part of the configuration. So, but the reason you have it in there as an option is you have the ability to maybe change or dynamically change the quantity that's required. So for this one, we can uncheck it. Over here, you can decide whether or not you want to enable the quantity for changing, or you can simply just default the quantity like this with a quantity 1. Over here, you have the ability to do the unit of measure. And if you do allow the salesperson to play around with the quantities, what is the min, what is the max, what is the lot or the batch quantity that you're doing? Is there going to be any scrap? Are we back flushing these materials, just absorbing them in? What kind of material type is it? Is there a price factor on this? Meaning, if you select this, am I taking that price that I normally have in the stock or non-stock item, and am I adding a factor? One obviously would be the same price, but for example, 2 would be double the price. If we're subcontracting this out, what's the source? And do I want to print the results for each of these items? So over here, I've selected all my options. And then under attributes, we have the ability to collect information from the salesperson, basically specifications, specific specifications that can be used later to produce. We're not going to set that up in this video, but this is where you'd add all your attributes. So now we'd come back to our configurator. And you can see this is where it pulled it all in. Now, in order to finish this off, notice this fixed included came from the feature default. Let's uncheck that. But over here, we need to include what the operation ID is in the bill of material. So our operational step is going to be putting this together, making this decision or having this decision during the assembly phase. And that's included for all of these. But you could put different operation IDs based on the different option that the salesperson selects. And once again, you have the ability to have minimum and maximum quantity. So we can put that in here. And then you have the ability that, if I'm going to select this option, I'm going to produce 2 of them anyway. That's not applicable here. And then again, your scrap factor, the material type, whether we're back flushing this, these are non-stock items anyway, so that's not really applicable. Now over here on the right, again, see this equals 1. That's the default we want to present in the configurator. So I'm just going to copy and paste that and put that in there. And lastly, I do want up here to have a minimum and a maximum selection. I don't want to allow the end user, the salesperson, to make multiple selections because it's just not applicable. So now what you have the ability to do is click this test configuration. So before we put it in the hands of a salesperson and they can use it in a quote or a sales order, we can actually check it here. So we'll click test configuration, see what it looks like. And again, under attributes, we don't have any attributes that are applicable here. Under options, though, we have the ability to go in here and select which option we're going to choose. And again, notice we have a price of $200 because, as I said, this standard bed is included with the base model. Now, part of this is because we're not including the base price for the pickup. So, because it makes no sense, if somebody gets a long bed, are they really going to pay only $200? No, they're going to pay a base price plus the $200. So let's close this. And we'll go over to price. And instead of just children all, we want the parent and the children to add it up. And we have an option here, do I want to just update the price afterwards or during selection? During selection or after selection is better. So now we'll go back and we'll click test configuration. And what you see here is a base price. This came from the inventory ID. This inventory ID has this price here. So when I add, for example, a regular standard bed, it doesn't change. But when I go over here to the long bed, notice it goes up $200. If I go all the way up to a crew cab, it goes all the way up to $49,795. That's the prices I put in there, right or wrong. Those are the prices that are in the system. So now let's add another feature. So now we have our configuration, the body configuration. We want to actually get into the trim. So that's all set up. We'll mirror these numbers here. We'll take off this default. And we want to make sure that there's just equals 1 as the required quantity. We'll pick our operational ID. And this is good. We'll save it. Let's add one more feature here, and that is the engine. And I should be able to find it here. Okay. So once again, we require one engine at least. This already has the required quantity in there. Great. We'll put in our operational ID. Everything is in this one operation. And we'll hit save. Now we have 3 configuration items. So let's go in and let's do the test configuration, and then we're going to establish some rules for this. So after we pick our, for example, standard bed, we can then go in and pick what trim level we're going to do, which is the SLT, and then we can pick our appropriate engine. Now, if we try to select more than one and we hit finish, well, you see an error message here already, but it says selection must be smaller than 2. The maximum selection is 1. So it's telling us right away that that's a problem. I have to uncheck one of these. So now we could finish this and be done with it. But what if certain trim levels, for example, the Pro, doesn't allow you to have some of the bigger engines or some of the different engines? So for that, we're going to create some rules. So we'll go over here to rules, and we'll select where the rule is stemming from. In other words, what's the trigger point of this rule? So that would be the trim. So based on what trim it is, we'll determine what engine we're going to get. So we'll create our first rule, and we have options here. We can include, meaning whatever rule we put here, it's going to include the, in this case, the engine option. But we'll get to that in a second. You see the target feature, you'd select it first. Or we can exclude, so we can say, all right, everything else but this, whatever's easier. Or we could make this feature absolutely required. If I select, for example, the Pro trim level, then I don't have a choice. I have to pick this option. So what we'll do is we'll start off with excluding. We'll pick our source option. So in this case, if we only get the Pro, then the engine itself, we're going to exclude the bigger engine. We'll do another rule here because the Pro also can't get the diesel engine. Then what we're going to add is an include rule where if you select the AT4, you can get the diesel and you can get the 6.2. And with the Denali, we'll do it a little differently. With the Denali, we're not allowing the Turbo Max to be selected. We're just going to drop that. We'll hit the save button on this, and we'll click Test Configuration. We'll go to Options. We'll select a cab. Doesn't matter. We don't have any rules for it. And we'll select our trim. So first we'll start off with the Pro, and then we'll come down to our engine, and notice again, you only have the 2 options. If we go back and we select anything else, we only created rules for the AT4, the Denali, and the Pro. If we select anything else, you'll notice all of the engine options. And notice Acumatica gives you a little pop-up here, inactive rules. It's saying, well, these are the rules that aren't really active right now because they're not applicable. But if I go back and I unselect this and I pick the AT4, then notice it gives me just the options I can choose. Now, there's a misconfiguration here because it's actually selecting both, which if we try to finish, it's saying the selection is wrong. So let's go out of this and let's fix that. And the reason for that is because for the AT4, we're telling it to include instead. So for that, it would be better to use an exclude rule. So, and that's just a pickup here. So we're going to exclude the Turbo Max engine, and we're going to exclude the 5.3. Now we'll save it. We'll test the configuration. We'll click Options. Let's get something in here. Let's pick our AT4. And notice it's not automatically including for us. So a little bit of misunderstanding on that. The include actually checks it for you, whereas the exclude just takes away the options. So a little bit different than what I explained, but we learned it together. That's a good thing. So now I can pick my 3.0 liter turbo diesel, and I can finish it, and I'm done. There's no saving here because this is just a test. So now that I have my configuration done, under my status, I can change it to active. I'll save it. And now where do I use this? Well, we talked about it before, right? I could use it in the quote. I can use it in the order. So if you're using CRM, you can create an opportunity, create a quote, and make that a configuration. Acumatica knows this item that you have. And if it's a configuration item, then it will automatically give you the option to configure it while you're in the quote or the order. So if we go over here to a sales order, create a new one, pick our customer, we'll add our item, give it a quantity, and based on the screen, you have to save first before the configure button lights up. Some screens don't require that. I haven't quite figured that out yet when Acumatica enables the configure. I suspect there's just some housekeeping Acumatica needs to do to get this button enabled all the time. So now we'll click configure. Now keep in mind, this is a configuration that I created earlier. So this is going to have a few more options. So we'll click on options here and we'll click our configuration. So there's more rules here. Notice if I pick the standard regular cab bed, the only thing I can pick is the Trim Pro. And also if I pick the long bed, it's the same thing. But if I pick the double cab, I now have some options for my trim. I don't have any rules there, so you have all the options there. But if we pick, for example, a Pro, under the engine, I only have these options. If I pick a SLT, I have a few more options. There's 3 option selections, engine selections. And again, if I pick something like the Denali, I'm now down to these options as well. So I'm going to pick my turbo diesel. And then over here, I can pick my seat. So notice again, the leather seats. I get the leather seats because I have the Denali. I go back to, let's say, an SLE. I only get the fabric seats. So the rules can be configured. You can do a lot with these rules and really configure and make sure that you give the salesperson the guide rails and the guardrails so that they don't get in trouble and they don't try to build something that you just can't build. So here we'll select the fabric seats and we'll click finish. And we'll close it. Now that we have this order, which is configured, if we scroll over to the right, you have a few options here. But the biggest one is mark for production. So that's defaulted based on this item. The item profile, the stock item profile, is defaulting to mark for production. So that means I could either go here and create my production order. It's plural, but really it means production order. Or I can go to a production order, create production order screen from here and create all of my production orders. So that's the difference, right? You can do one at a time, or at the end of the day, or midday, or you can put it on a schedule. You can create all of your production orders. So notice this one here, it's 12/17. I have a lot of other work to do here, and creating these. Some of these other production orders are very old. I suspect the customers are pretty upset. But we're going to process this one. And you can see it's created here. If we go into production order maintenance, we can see our new production order here. So now we can take a look at it. So it's in the status of planned. Any dates, constraint dates would have been picked up by the order itself. Under references, we can see that this is the order. We can get back to it. The source is a configuration of the bill of material. Here it is. You have the ability to click configure here. So that you can take a look and see how it's configured. And so if we click on our split screen here, we take a look. So this is the production order maintenance. This is the details. You can see under assembly, it's got everything that we need in order to get the job done. So let's release this order. And we'll create a move transaction for it. As if we're getting everything done. This particular production order, I don't think lets me skip to operation 20, but we're going to try it anyway. Yeah, I can't do it. Acumatica allows us to either skip steps based on the production order type, or we need to go one step at a time. So I'm going to produce one, and I'm going to get myself through the assembly phase. And then I could create a new one here, but if I do it from my production order maintenance, it fills in all the information for me. So now it knows the next step is 20. So we'll take it off hold and we'll release it. Now, as the result of this, if I refresh, you can see it's completed. If I refresh here, this is all done as well. And if I start looking at some of my different widgets, my different side panels, I can see that my performance, I'm 100% complete across the board. Cost variance, all of that stuff is being done. And if we take a look at our events, we can see all the different events that we did. There's the moves, there's the completion. If we go over to our line details, we can see that this quantity 1 was inserted. If it was serialized, you see the serial number, either automatically generated, or it would have required us to put in a serial number for this given item before it could produce it and do the final move. So now if we go back to our sales order, you can see at the bottom, we have one on hand and it's available for shipping. We can get our shipping done and we're done. So thanks so much for watching this video. In another video, we'll talk about attributes and how you can use those to leverage your configuration and get them produced. Hopefully you found this video useful, and if you did, please click the like button. And if you have any questions about this or anything else, please let us know. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks again, and have a great day.